I think just be open with who we are and how God made us.
We should value coaching more than the world.
Because there's always something that you're saying where I'm like, oh, I think I need to consider that.
We grow from our setbacks as much as we grow from our successes.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Patros Podcast, where we are pursuing healthy masculinity. My name is Allan, Pereira, and my co-host over here, Jeff Ford.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Doing good.
What everybody doesn't know is that you had to do that like 7 times just now.
A lot of times. I'm always an on-the-fly guy, so anything that's a little bit scripted just catches me off guard.
Yeah, no, I feel you. It's been
a
a minute.
It has been a second. For you guys, it's only been a week.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I'm a little under the weather today, so don't get too close.
Yeah.
But that's what happens when you have kids.
Facts.
And I've been traveling, so I've been in. We had a conference in Tampa, then I was in Chicago for a short stint, then I've been in Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. So what I'm building my immunity, I guess, is what I'm doing with all of these different places here.
Hopefully, mine's and Rob's will stick up.
Yeah, I know.
We're good.
I know.
No, we're fine.
So we are excited today because we have got a very special guest.
Yes, we do.
In the studio with us. And, just a couple of highlights on Mr. Rob Faw joining us in the studio. Rob, you are a board-certified master coach, and this podcast is really going to be delving into coaching, what that is, what does it look like, what doesn't it look like, is it biblical? So we're going to be asking you some of those questions, but I think, you're a 70-time marathoner. Right, so the man does hard things. It's just different.
I don't think I've ran 70 times in the last 10 years.
You've driven 70 times.
He's run 70 marathons.
You've probably ran more than I've driven in the last.
Oh my goodness,
we're all capable. Just decide whether we want to do it or not.
Yeah, some of us are just fat. I'm playing.
Oh my goodness.
Just kidding.
So you're an author. I know you right now. You're studying your PhD, and you happen to be my coach. So one of the great things that I just had the privilege of sitting under Rob. He's worked with so many companies internationally, locally, like taking them to market, helping them thrive, helping them to 10x, all of these different things. And I think what I appreciate the most about you, Rob, is that I always walk away from you being challenged. Always walk away because there's always something that you're saying where I'm like, oh, I think I need to consider that. I'm excited because we got a little 2-part podcast, and we'll get into kind of that growth mindset, which has been influential. You've been influential in my life on that. But I think I was thinking about the 2 biggest things that I have taken away from our coaching is, number 1, you have to frame things, and number 2, you have to name things. Like you probably didn't even know that, but those are two of the biggest things that I've taken from you. Is like, if you're any project you get going on, especially when it's new, because there's a lot of, where I'm at is in the creative space, a lot of ideation, and so when you're going down that road, at some point you've got to frame it up. Because otherwise you're just chasing
all over the place.
Yeah, you're chasing too many paths. And so framing that up and kind of coming up, usually it's 3. There's something maybe you can talk about
threes,
that. Yeah, there's some magic in the 3. And then naming things, like once you have that framework, then calling it by a name, and it doesn't have to be a great name, but you have to name it something. And so and then everybody kind of gets that vernacular, because now I know that my team is talking about X, whatever we named it. They're talking about that. So anyway, those are 2 of the great things that you've taught me. But happy to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who's Rob Faw?
Yeah, Rob Faw. So thank you very much. Good to see you both again, and Happy New Year. Can you believe it's already February?
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
It's crazy.
It's just awesome. I love that. And so, so I grew up in Washington, D.C., and came down to Florida when I was a junior in high school, played a couple years of high school basketball, a couple years of junior college basketball. It was right at the end of the Vietnam War, and I had a draft number. And I was dating my teenage girlfriend at the time, and we went to the library to study one night. And I said, Jill, and this was after my second year of playing college basketball, and I realized that was as far as I was going to continue my college career. And I said, Jill, I could join the Air Force. I'd have a job at night. We'd go to school. Why don't we get married? And she said, okay, let's go do that. And so that was it. And someone asked me, said, was that your proposal? I said, it pretty much was my proposal.
Wow.
And so she's a sweetheart.
Romantic.
Yeah.
So anyway, we agreed to do that. I joined the Air Force. Lived and worked in Texas, down in Florida. We had an F-4 fighter squadron that had just come back from Vietnam. And then went over to England for a year. For the first time, I've actually lived and worked in England 3 different times for a total of 7 years.
Wow.
And an interesting story, so you'll never have to worry about, oh, what if I got Rob Fall's blood in a transfusion? You'll never have to worry about that. Because when we were over there, Chernobyl.
Oh.
And when Chernobyl happened, right, basically you have to be really careful about mad cow disease, evidently, of all things. Yeah. So anyway, I not because I wouldn't want to help other people with giving them my blood, but I'm unable to do that. Just an aside. So that's interesting.
Okay, that is interesting.
Yeah. So I never would have thought that, but that's kind of the way it is. And
so are you not an organ donor then? As well?
You know what? I believe. Well, I am an organ donor, but maybe they haven't cross-typed my blood. So we'll see what happens. By that time, I'm in heaven, and
yeah.
we'll see.
You're not going to know.
We'll let the earthly people kind of
you
figure
don't
that out.
invite people into heaven with their organs.
That's right.
Oh, quick entry.
Yeah.
After that.
So
This
anyway,
was a fast pass.
came back, was on the GI Bill. Most of my schooling has really been at night while I was working. So I love that. I'm very grateful for that. I've got a background in running businesses, primarily in the technology sector. As you know, Jeff, I've written a couple of books. I've got a new one coming out in 2 or 3 months called World Class Value, which is interesting. It's about leadership excellence and organizational excellence, and so I'm happy about that. And along the way, I kind of ran 70 marathons, and I'm an Ironman, and I love learning. I'm very passionate about that. 2.5 years ago, I went back and started my PhD. And I think I may be one of the oldest PhD students in the country. I'm not sure what that means, but I love learning. I know that.
But you're crushing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing really well. I work very hard for every grade, and so far so good. And I would just want to perform at a high level. And we're beginning to frame up, you mentioned framework, we're beginning to frame up what the contextual framework of the dissertation will look like. And so I'm actually in the middle of that right now in an advanced qualitative research study class that I'm involved with. So, yeah, I'm a board-certified master Christian life coach.
Yeah, so you got to tell us, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a board-certified master coach?
Well, first of all, you got to live long enough, right? And so I've kind of checked that box. And then you have to have a certain amount of experience, and I've done that. So having been on the board of a number of different businesses all over, run a number of companies, having coached a lot of people, I got to take some classes in order to become certified, and based on my experience and biblical beliefs, and it was through the American Association of Christian Counselors, so the Board of Christian Coaching, and so that was about 7 years ago. And so, but I've kind of always had a coaching leadership style. When I think back to, I don't know that I knew that I was had that style back in those days, but that was really more. I always like making things better, growing things, developing things. So I'm been married for 50 years, which is a blessing.
Wow.
And Jill never thinks it's that funny when I say, oh, yeah, you know, we were in grade school and we got married. Don't tell people that. And so, but anyway, so
Just ahead of your time.
A little bit. So anyway, but she was a teenager, and, you know, I was young. And so we just celebrated our 50th anniversary here in the last month or two.
That's
I mean,
huge.
that's got to be a very small percentage of people who
Probably
celebrate
smaller
50.
percentage than what you said about you taking your PhD at your age.
Yeah.
I wonder if you're like in the top 0.5%, especially in today's society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we were young, and
fewer than 5%.
There you go.
Wow.
So we're different, and I think that's what attracts people to each other. She's very relational, and I love that about her. And my go-to, I'm a critical, analytical kind of a person. I've kind of developed relational skills. It isn't my first go-to. It is her first go-to. She's really good at that. And but we're united by faith. So along the way, we've had our own challenges, least of which we lost 2 children at birth, and so we've got 2 grown men children now. Yeah. And so, you know, we just kind of kept going. And I think our faith has really been a big part of that walk together. So she's a sweetheart. If you can't be a friend of Jill's, you pretty much can't be a friend of anybody. She's just a good person.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's kind of where I'm at now. And right now I'm coaching businesses, executives, and leaders. As you know, I have a podcast called The School of Empowerment. And there's a whole story behind that and how it's happened. I have a great executive assistant, Brittany, who is a big part of helping me manifest, that content, if you will, in the digital media. So yeah, I love it and looking forward to more of it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Just a wealth of experience. I think one of the things I've really appreciated, even in the Patros, for those who maybe this is their first time tuning into the Patros podcast, Patros is Greek for father. And so the word Patros really comes from this idea of elder. Like the first person in a tribe kind of it would be the person who, if you were in a room full of people, you're looking around going, who's the one I need to talk to? Like who's the one who knows the most? He's been around, they've got wisdom.
That's the root of our tree. Of
yes,
our
like
tree,
that's the guy. He kind of he's got the stories, he's got the know-how, but it's more wisdom than knowledge. And so I think that's what I've taken from you, just being around you. You have that very, very much of a Patros vibe, just wanting to learn and kind of soak that up. So you mentioned, there's so many different ways we could go here. But when I was thinking about this, I'm like, okay, I know Rob in like several capacities, right? So we got Rob the coach, which is kind of how I was introduced to you. You got Rob the entrepreneur, and Rob the world traveler, Rob the author, Rob the student, Rob the extreme sports guy, Rob the husband, Rob the father, and then obviously we've got Rob the follower of Christ. So we'll come back to that one, and we'll come back to the coach. Of those other ones, though, what of those, can you let us know, like why entrepreneurism, or why kind of being this world traveler kind of, entity, why be an author? Maybe just kind of touch on some of that stuff that you find inspiring.
Yeah. So I was actually having this discussion, unbeknownst to the question you were just going to ask, with Jill last night. I said, do you remember the time where I said, I need some help in completing my taxes? And it was the beginning of my entrepreneurial walk. And I had a jet strapped to my back. I think I've mentioned to you in the past, I've got 4 million miles of air travel, which is like being an alcoholic. You travel too much, right? So I have done that. Not the alcohol, but the traveling.
Yeah.
And although that would be okay as well. And so I, just keep it in proper context. But yeah, so I don't know. I would say that you just realize what your giftings are, and you're called to, like yourself and Allan. I'm a creator. I love building and growing and developing things. So I was attracted, and then God put you in positions with opportunities. I was the first person in my tech company that was an expatriate. And so I was, when the kids were babies, we were living in Toronto for 1.5 years and then over in England for 3 years. And so I would have these entrepreneurial journeys. I'm very curious, and so that kind of feeds an entrepreneurial mindset as well, so always developing, growing, that kind of a thing. So the entrepreneurism, I think, is really it kind of just happened, and then all of a sudden I realized that's what I really enjoy. I do have a financial background, and at one time I thought I actually had a dual major in management and accounting, but I was one class short in accounting, and that was because when our first son, Joey, who I think you both know, when he was born, I needed to back off from my schooling because, anyway, we just had some family matters that required me to do that. And so anyway, but I have been reasonably director level accounting in a number of companies, a controller. And then when I came back from living in England, I came back into a Fortune 50 company, and they put me into a leadership development program. And now all of a sudden I'm in marketing, then I'm in product management, and then I'm in business development. I'm doing engineering things. Like, where's that coming from? So, but I have a very structured, critical thinking mindset, so it kind of, parlayed, if you will. So, and then my largest customer for this new technology that was introducing broadband to the world asked me to come and set up their international group. And I don't know that I actually knew it at the time, but it was intentional knowing that we needed to have an international presence in order for that company to go public, which we did 3 months later. At the time, I was president of global operations when we did that, then became CEO. So Allan was asking me earlier, so I've been the CEO of maybe a half a dozen companies, startups, and publicly traded companies. And so I've got my experiences. And you have wins, you have losses, you make money, you lose money. And so for me, I don't really spend a lot of time fussing with the losses. I'm just really all about, okay, what can I learn from it? Where do I go next? So it is a little bit of that entrepreneurial thinking. It's a grind, but I love it.
There's grit.
It is grit. And, people ask me about, well, 70 marathons. When I say that to my oldest son, he says, that's good, Dad. He said, but it's kind of a little bit more impressive that you're doing all that training and early in the morning to prepare for those marathons. I never really thought about that, but I love the early morning runs, at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, where you're the only one out there in 80-degree weather with 90% humidity, and it's oddly enjoyable for me. I can't explain it, so other than what I just said. And so, but that was the entrepreneurial walk, and it kind of manifests in other areas of my life as well.
I'm interested in something that you had mentioned earlier about, like, you're not specifically wired in a relational aspect, and that you had to develop and build those skills. Because your wife is more so, right? But so many of us, myself included, like, when we're not good at something or we're not specifically wired for that, we don't technically like to work on it, or we just won't work on it, and we'll just kind of zero in. But relationships is something that God calls us to. So how did you press into that? And even today, I can imagine you still have to constantly, like, get back on track with building relationships. Like, how do you maintain that or do that?
I think just be open with who we are and how God made us, right? And so I'm wired in a certain way. Everybody's wired differently. I appreciate relationships, and I love relationships. And some people, it's just like they're naturally engaging, right? And I do believe that people do find me that way. At the end of the day, it's just kind of developed over the course of a lifetime. Who else is getting up at 3:30 in the morning and training, right? And oh, by the way, they said, oh, do you need to work with groups when you're doing your marathon training? And I'm thinking to myself, no, I actually kind of prefer doing it on my own. Why? I get so locked in to whatever I'm doing. Even at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'll run into people on a sidewalk because I'm locked in, and I don't even see them until 5 feet before I get ready to run into them, which is interesting, right? So I'm kind of disciplined in that way. So I think it's just be open to who we are. Recognize relationships are essential, no doubt, and so I just kind of lean into it. And if it's uncomfortable at times because of a personality type or the way that God wired us, okay, I'm getting close. If I'm getting uncomfortable, we were talking about this earlier as well. I don't want to be comfortable. I want to be uncomfortable. And I have found throughout my life, when we're uncomfortable, whatever it may be, whether it's personality type or a challenge at home or in work or whatever, when we lean into that discomfort, it's kind of like, oh, I'm getting close. Right? I get a chance to get a little bit better in that regard. And so I'm always learning, always trying to be better. And what happens is you develop a little mastery through your experience and just being open to want to address your blind spots, if you will, in that regard. So
I can
no, go ahead.
I can imagine, like, because right now, from everything that every conversation we've ever had, you seem fearless, right? But I think that's because you've faced every fear that you've had, or most fears that you've had, right? What are practical ways for young people, like I'm 30 and people younger than me, like, we look at the world sometimes. Some people are fearless, and it's probably not a good thing because it's going to end them up in a bad place. But some of us that are trying to be calculated, but that also brings fear into the equation, how have you practically over time developed that fearlessness?
Right. So I would say that I think I am more of a calculated risk taker by nature. Right? I had a really interesting conversation with my executive coach, and I had a little health event this last summer, and I'd come out of a particular procedure, and the surgeon came in and recommended a course of action, and I kind of was interpreting that this was the only option that I had. It's the way that I was experiencing the interaction. And so my response to this person was I thought about it and it was almost a potentially life-threatening kind of a procedure is what he was saying. And so I thought about it for about 15 seconds. I said, that's unexpected. Okay, let's go.
Wow.
That was the depth of my consideration, which is really interesting. So all of a sudden, my kids, God bless them, they kind of got involved and said, I think you need to get a second opinion, so on and so forth. So, weeks later, after I had a less invasive procedure, which had a better outcome, praise God for that, my coach asked me, I said, well, what is that about me? Because I was curious, what are you hearing and what does that relate to me? And she said, what's your threshold for risk? What a great question.
Yeah.
And so I do have a high threshold for risk. And at the same time, it's probably driven by faith.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm not afraid to walk where I believe I'm being led. At times, it's certainly possible that I could mitigate certain potential risks that might even be there, but then I say, okay, we'll get through that. And I just think that, we grow from I don't love the word losses, but we grow from our setbacks as much as we grow from our successes. And so I've had plenty of setbacks, and I'm very grateful for that. So I think it's a mindset.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's kind of like, okay, this was hard, but that's where I'm going. And so this was a little bit challenging, but okay, that's okay. I think discipline helps a lot.
Yeah.
When we're in that walk, that courage walk, as you would say.
And is that something you have to comfort your wife throughout that? Maybe both of you. I'm asking this because you're a risk taker too, calculated for the most part over time.
Oh yeah, my wife is not a risk taker.
Yeah.
Yeah, she likes her comfortability.
And I'm asking these questions because I'm typically a risk taker on most things.
Yeah.
Certain things that I'm very, I'm not going to take risks on. But my wife's not a risk taker, so I'd love to learn that from both of you because I can imagine your wife's probably not as much of a risk taker.
Probably not as much. And so I think that we just honor and respect our spouse.
Okay.
And I think that being open and honoring the gifts that God gave each of us where they're different. And I think when we do that, it actually is a shared experience. I mean, Jill has said many times, she said, I'm not so sure I would have traveled and lived abroad for 4.5 years. I mean, the babies were just that. They were babies. One of them was in diapers. And so
I just pictured Tom in a diaper.
That's right. That's right. And he was cute as a button. And so, but we were up in Canada. I mean, we had one car. We went up to Canada. I walked every day an hour to work. Because we had the one car, Jill had the car, so I'd walk in the snow. It was just what you did, at least what we did. And so here she was. She had no friends. She had the 2 babies.
Wait, did you walk because you had to, or was it a decision?
It was a decision because I wanted my wife to have the car to be mobile, to do whatever she wanted to do during the course of the day.
Okay.
Right? And for me, a walk was just at least some form of exercise.
Yeah. That's
in a fairly high stress environment.
70 marathons.
I was in at the time. So I think that. I think that just kind of lean into it and get comfortable with your discomfort. And in that sense, if we're walking in faith, it actually is not that hard.
Well, I think over time, too, if you treat your wife respectfully and you love her, she ultimately is ingratiated to you, right? And so she learns to trust where she's having a difficult time, right? Because it's like, well, I know that he has our best interests. And then, there are times where I don't think there's been many, but there are times when there's a big disagreement on something, and I will generally defer to her just because I need her to be on board. But we're going to talk through it, and we're going to get on the same page. But there are times where, the Holy Spirit will just come in and it's very clear that I need to back down, or it's very clear that she needs to back down. So
basically like who compromises in each scenario kind of thing.
Yeah. And I
submits.
Because there's a mutual submission there, right?
Yeah.
Ephesians 5 says that we are to submit one to another. So there are times where I feel like as the male, I've got to submit because my wife is not feeling comfortable with something. And for me, it's maybe not as important, or it's like, whatever. But then there are times where she's got to submit just because for what, I believe I have a calling. I believe, I know this is what God wants us to do. I respect you. I won't do it if you don't want me to, but I think this is where God is asking us to go. And sometimes you got to take that leap of faith and just, trust that it's going to work out. And then generally she'll be like, okay, all right, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And she may do it reluctantly, but then over time, at least in our marriage, over time, you see things just work out. And you realize that those decisions that you thought were life-changing, really, maybe they were life-changing, but the weight of the world wasn't actually riding on that decision.
Gotcha.
There's a new day. And if you messed up with one, to your point, it's like, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try this path now. And embracing kind of that mindset over worry about everything, right? But I think a lot of it just comes with time. And that's the whole Patros idea, too.
Yeah.
A lot of it just comes with time and experience.
That's what it sounds like just hearing both of you.
Well, I think honoring.
Do y'all want to hear more of that conversation? Well, you can by becoming a Patros subscriber. You'll get exclusive member-only content. Just go to the link in the description or go to the Patros website.
Yeah, and when you become a subscriber, like what you're telling us is that you enjoy this content and you want to hear more of it. So every dollar that you give helps us do just that.
So thank you again for listening as we just together go on this journey of embracing healthy masculinity.